The point I wanted to make today is that if there's a reason not to work with a client and you can't get past it, you should simply say no. In fact, some of the clients that I work with, one of the most valuable things that I do for them is I actually give them a nice way of saying no, because there are just certain clients that for whatever reason you shouldn't take on.
Welcome to the Master Dealmaker's Secrets podcast. And now, here's sales growth strategist, John Blake.
Welcome to Master Dealmaker Secrets. I'm John Blake. This is episode 210. And today we're going to talk about the 3 reasons why you would want to say no to a potential client. But before we do that, if you have got leads that you've spoken to that haven't bought yet, they're sitting there in that proposal sent column, I have got a particularly valuable resource for you. It is over at johnblakeaudio.com. What you'll get when you go there is a 15-minute audio that walks you through exactly how you can keep in contact with those people that contacted you, that you spoke to, that you sent them, made some sort of an offer to them and they haven't bought, how you can keep in contact with them until they buy in a way that is proactive, in a way that is professional, and in a way that won't annoy them. They won't want to block your number or take out a restraining order on you or anything. I've used this in my own business for years. I've taught it to hundreds and hundreds of different businesses, and I'm sure it'll work for you. Not only will you get the 15-minute audio, but what you'll also get is a PDF that's got the exact word-for-word scripts, exactly what to write in your emails. You just basically select, copy, and paste, and you can populate, obviously customize them a bit for what you're doing and show you exactly where to do that, as well as what to say on the phone if you get their voicemail, what to say if you get through. It really is the comprehensive part of what I work with my clients on in the follow-up part of the process. It is at johnblakeaudio.com. Please go get it, put it into action, and I would love you to let me know how it went. So put that into practice and, let me know. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 reasons to say no to a potential client. Now, when you first start, you're not quite as good at this. There are probably clients that you take on that you shouldn't. But the point I wanted to make today is that if there's a reason not to work with a client and you can't get past it, you should simply say no. In fact, some of the clients that I work with, one of the most valuable things that I do for them is I actually give them a nice way of saying no, because there are just certain clients that for whatever reason you shouldn't take on. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go over those 3 things. So I'm going to go through them one by one and give you some examples as we go. The first one is they actually don't need what you do, right? So sometimes probably my favorite example of this is I worked with a plastic surgeon, and he had a really good website, and on the website there were descriptions of the different procedures that he did, and he also had some animations, like some cartoon animations, as weird as that sounds, of all of the different procedures that he did. And so people would book in to see him, and they would go and see him, and I was helping him to re-engage some of the people in his database. That was sort of my main thing with him. But one of the questions I asked him is I said to him, why, when someone comes to you, out of every 10 people that come to you, how many of those people think that they need procedure A, but they really need something different? And he said, about 70 or 80%. So often people self-diagnose what they need, and they'll come to you asking you for something, but what they actually need is actually not what you provide. And at that point you're actually faced with the choice of either selling to them or suggesting that they go somewhere else. Now, I'm sure it stands to reason that most people would let someone know if what it is that they have isn't the right next step for that particular client, but some people don't. And so I guess there are some people that just sell to them anyway, which is obviously not a good call. But then there are other people that just say, no, we can't help you. And really the most important thing there is have somewhere you can send them, right? So if there's a pattern of behavior, if people coming to you and saying, oh, I need you to help me with this, and you know that based on what they tell you, it's not their next step, it's not what's going to help them to fix the problem that they've got, it is really important that you point them in the right direction, because every zero knows a hero, right? So someone who has never spent a cracker with you can refer you to somebody else if you look after them. And in most cases, people just want to be looked after. They want to be pointed in the right direction. And some people even build that into their sales process. They say, look, if I can help you, I will certainly show you how that will work, and I'll give you a fee. If I find that I can't help you, I will be polite and let you know, and I will point you in the right direction where you can get the specific help that's more appropriate for your particular set of circumstances. And so that's a really good way to say no to someone. And like I said, some of the clients that I work with, one of the most valuable things that I do for them is actually to give them a really nice way to say no. And having a nice way to say no includes having somewhere that you can point them where they can get the help that's appropriate for their particular set of circumstances. So that's number one. They actually don't need what you do. Again, probably stands to reason, but it's important to point that out. And as I said, add that last bit, which is you need to be able to point them in the right direction. The second one, they won't get a great ROI, or you don't believe that they will get a good result, right? So this is quite appropriate for my business. Like sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, oh, we've got a 90% conversion rate, but we want to get better. So it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I will look at someone's sales system and I'll go, I don't believe that your investment in me is going to give you a big enough ROI. And so based on that, I don't believe that we should proceed, right? And I think that's a really good thing to say, because I have had visibility on so many different businesses, and there are some that would be better to simply just keep doing what they're doing. Like I said, it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally, sometimes after 20 years, you think you might have seen everything, but occasionally you don't. Like there's someone that comes along that thinks they need help and they actually don't need help. And so if that's the case, rather than take them on board as a client, you're better to tell them, because again, every zero knows a hero. Now they're probably not a zero, because they're a great business. They're doing well. They've got really tight systems, but they can easily, because you are upfront and honest with them, they could point you, they could refer business to you. And it's just good. It's just goodwill. And again, give them your take on what it is that you believe they could do to improve things, if it doesn't stack up from a business sense for them to invest in you. So, so one of the most important things there is there a big enough upside? So these days when I work with a client, I want to make sure that we can smash it out of the park. I want to make sure that there's a really, really strong ROI on what we do. And I want to make sure of that before we proceed. The third one is that you don't think that you can work with them. And in that situation, it's normally a personality thing, right? So, and again, it doesn't happen very often, but it's important to have some filters in place for people that you don't believe you can work with, because especially if you're doing a long-term consulting gig like I do in a lot of cases, or perhaps if you're helping someone build a house, like they're building like a designer house, you're pretty much in bed with a builder for the next 9 months, give or take. And it's important that you've actually got somebody that you are compatible with, that you can work with. My wife recently sold her business, and she wanted to make sure that the people that bought the business from her, that she liked them, because she knew she was going to be able to work with them and help them transition into the business, and that she enjoyed their company and wanted to work with them. So that was a real, she had quite a few offers, And that was a really big consideration. It's like, can I work with these people? Am I prepared to spend the time? Will I want to invest the time with them to make sure that they succeed? And so there's a couple of examples that I wanted to share with you. But there's a particular lady called Mandy Ellison that has a pretty cool take on this, where I learned about the hazardous client list. So over time, you will learn that there are certain clients that you can't work with. And it makes sense to write down some of the things that would prevent you from wanting to take on a client and the circumstances that would lead for that to happen, right? So on the example that Mandy shared, she had that they don't value their people, right? So they treat their employees with disrespect. I think that was one of the things that were on her hazardous client list. For me, it's people that don't value my time. So if in our preliminary dealings, I've got somebody who's always late or wanting to reschedule even before I've actually started, that's a red flag for me, because effectively I'm scheduling a series of coaching sessions, and if people aren't rocking up on time, then that's a problem, because I've got to schedule all the sessions in and make sure that I'm supporting them in the right way. So work out what that list is, and have a nice way to say no. Just say, look, at this particular point in time, I think you'd be better suited to go in this direction, or just have a polite way of saying no. So probably one of my favorite examples of this is I had a guy who I had known for quite some time, and he had a tech startup, and he wanted me to be involved, and he wanted me to be involved in exchange for shares in this particular business. And I said to him that I'm not interested. I said, that's not how I work. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. He just kept saying, no, you should do this. Everyone else that's involved is doing it in exchange for some shares and da da da. And I just said no, to a point where he knew because I made it very clear. It took me a while, but I made it very clear that I would not be interested. And then at that point, he said that he would, okay, well, what would your fee be? And at that point, at least in my mind, there'd been such disregard shown for the way that I work and the value of my time, is that I just said, oh, look, I'm not interested at all. Given what's transpired so far, I'm not interested in proceeding. So that's a good example of a situation where it wouldn't be right. And so in most cases, over time, you develop this list, this list of red flags, and hopefully you can spot them. Because the other point that I wanted to make is that if you take on a client like that, you will resent the fact that they're behaving in the way that they have, especially because the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. And in most cases, the extra stress and the extra work that you'll end up having to do for that client is just not worth it. And you would be way better to wait until somebody who is a great fit comes along, who respects, your particular model, and that you click with personality wise, because there's a fit for everyone. It's like relationships. If someone isn't a fit for your business, they will probably be a fit for somebody else's. And if they aren't, then that's okay. But you shouldn't willingly make it your problem to take on a client that's less than ideal. So, so much of what I do is, I'm talking about, conversions and converting, as many of the inquiries as you can into paying clients. But there are certain situations where there are clients that you do not want to take on. And so that was why I wanted in this episode to cover off on that, because I think it's a really, really important distinction. So as always, thank you very much for tuning in. and I will talk to you on the next podcast. Cheers.
You've been listening to Master Dealmaker Secrets with John Blake. Subscribe to get more in-depth strategies and maximize your sales process with new episodes every other week. And double your inquiry to sale conversion with the lead flow you already have. Go to johnblakeaudio.com for his exclusive, free, no-fluff audio training and companion PDF guide.